Hello there. I'm Ben, and this is A Pebble for Your Shoe. I have a new word for you today. It's not a new word. It's an ancient word, but it's a new Hebrew word for probably many of you. And the word is Kedusha. And Kedusha, if I was to define it, it's the actions of sanctification. It's the act of, or the process, better, of how one makes themselves sanctified, set apart. Um, in Hebrew, it's the root word kadosh, which is set apart, which is also the translated into the word holy in English. Set apart, dedicated, um, sanctified. So it's the process of setting yourself apart for the dedication of God. And the first time I remember hearing the word Kadosha, I think of like the story of the Exodus, the great Exodus out of Egypt, when the Hebrews were done with the plagues on Egypt, and Egypt has finally had enough of them, and they kick them out and they let them go free, and they leave Egypt with all their livestock, with all their children, their whole families. Even some of the Egyptians are said to have left with them, and they go into the wilderness. And it's at that point where you get Kadosh. I think one of the first times that I remember hearing it. And they're like babies, right? They're a brand new born nation in a way, leaving Egypt. And they don't know what Kadosh is yet. They don't understand holiness and sanctification. They don't have the Torah yet. They don't have the laws and the commandments from God. They don't have their obligations yet. Um, and yet, you get this understanding that they're being separated, set apart from the rest of the world, set apart from Egypt. And God is calling them his own. That he took them out of there on eagle's wings, he says. And he pulled them out with his outstretched mighty arm, and set them apart from the rest of the world. The rest of the world, which was polytheistic, they had worshipped many gods, and Abraham and his offspring, the nation of Israel, they worship one God. They're the monotheistic belief, and so yeah, Kadosh is part of this because this is God literally setting them apart. Um, and so another place there you hear Kadosh is in Revelations, right? John's Revelation, where he sees the Sephirim, the winged angels with six wings, and they're the ones that float above the throne of God, calling out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." And so you get this idea that there's the word kadosh, which is used three times: holy, 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 kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. And so, what does it mean as Israel is exiting Egypt, um, and they're being called kadosh, a holy nation, a royal priesthood? Um, what does kadosh, kadosh mean? It could be. I heard it put this way, and it's Moses can't explain to them like sanctification and all this yet. They're brand new babies in a way in their faith. And so he puts it this way: there's a kadosh of olam, a kadosh of shana, and a kadosh of nefesh. And olam means like a space or a place. There's a holy place, right? Like the Mishkan, the tent of meeting, and the Mikdash. And inside of there is this space called the Holy of Holies, right? That's Kadosh of Kadoshes. So that's Kadosh Olam, sanctification of place or of space. And then there's Kadosh Shana. right? Like Rosh Hashanah, like the new year. So it's a holy setting apart of time. So there's a place, and then there's a time. Certain times. These preordained times by God, the holidays, the holy days, the high holidays in the fall, and the high holidays in the spring, right? Like Pesach, Passover. So you've got these appointed times of holiness, and uh, and then there was Shana, well, Kadosh Shana. That was Kadosh Shana, of time, and then there's Kadosh Nefesh. That's the third Kadosh. That nefesh means the spirit or the soul, right? You're setting your soul to be a holy place, just like there's a holy place physically in this world, the Holy of Holies, and where we go to worship. Um, and then there's this holy space that we set aside in our hearts, the nefesh, the soul, a place for God to dwell and meet with us. So those are the three holy places, or holy nouns, I guess you could say. Nouns, a person, place, or thing. So time, space, and the soul. Kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. Now, what does it mean? Why is it that at this specific moment that Kadosh is being brought up, or he's calling them a holy nation? Um, Moses is kind of explaining this to them in baby words. Um, and with this, they're kind of being instructed, right? When they're in the desert, God is saying, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." It's the great Shema, the mantra of Israel. And then it says, "You shall love him with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your resources, and you shall bind it, as a reminder between your eyes, as tefillin, and you shall take it as a binding on your arm." When they wrap their arms with that, tefillin is what they call it, or it's like a binding that they wrap around their arm to remind them that it's not just what we were cut loose from, the binding of the binds and the chains in Egypt, that God loosened their bind there. And it's not just about what you were loosened and cut free from, but it's about who you're binding to, what you're tying yourself to now that you're not under the slave, the taskmasters and the masters in Egypt. You're now with a new master who is kind and loving, and you tie yourself to that new master, to God. And so the tefillin that Moses has instructed them, through God, is that they're not just being loosed from their binds, but they're tying themselves to God. And that's kind of the idea of sanctification, is you're not just separating yourself from the world and your love from the world, but you've been set free from that so that you can tie yourself to God and to his instructions. Um, yeah, it's not just being set free, but it's being tied to as well. And that's what dedication is. That's what sanctification is you're not just being set free from something, but you're set apart and dedicated to something. It's a little paradigm shift there. And I want to say this. It's not like we're we're asked by God to separate ourselves completely from the world. If that was so, he would just take us out of this world and bring us straight in heaven once we've had our encounter with him and we choose to follow him and to say that he's our God. If he really wanted us to just be separate for separation's sake, he would just take us out, right? So he leaves us on earth to have an impact, to be his testimony to the rest of the world. So those secular relationships you have with your boss, with your coworkers, with your friends that you had before you started your journey with God, you're not supposed to just cut yourself free from those things. You're supposed to dedicate your life to God and be a testimony to them. Not like being a prude, not by being too salty or too bright with your light that it blinds them and they're annoyed by you, but you're supposed to represent God to them, not in a way to proselytize, but just so that it's like a pebble in their shoe. They think about it. Um, that's what I believe. And I think that's seen illustrated through the life of Yeshua, right? It's actually even illustrated through the life of how Jews live their lives. They don't proselytize. They don't go out and send missions around the world like Mormons or like a lot of Christians do. They are instructed to just live their life humbly and live it in a way that's different from the rest of the world and let their light shine so that they would see that they're different and see and question, why are these guys different? Who is their God? And it would, in a way, put a pebble in their shoe so that they would think about it and walk away with it. That's that's kind of the idea I see how Jews live their lives, not to proselytize, but to be a testimony of what God's done. That's what Abraham did, right? And that's what Jesus kind of did as well. He took Judas, who he knew would, from day one, would eventually betray him. He's Yeshua being God. If you believe that he is God, then you have to entertain the idea that he is omniscient, that he knows all things, he's all knowing, and which means that he foreknew that Judas would betray him in 3 years when he first became his friend. He knew that 3 years later he would betray him. Yet he ate with Judas, he taught Judas, he shared his life with Judas, he shared his ministry, and he even died for him. Um, and yet he loved him the whole time. He didn't have an agenda. And love shouldn't have an agenda. Love just loves. And that's what Jesus did. He loved Judas, even though he knew what was going to happen. And that's what holiness is about, too. It doesn't have an agenda other than to separate. It's not supposed to separate out of I'm holier than you. It's not supposed to separate out of fear that someone's going to bring you down. It separates in a way to dedicate. Um, it's like I wrote a book a few years ago. It's probably been actually like 15 years ago now. And I learned something as I was writing. You know how you'll have a book signing, you'll dedicate a book to someone. Um, Dedication is really no more than that. You take a book. I've got thousands of these books. They all look the same because they're the exact same book, but what makes a dedication separate from a dedicated book separate from all the others is the inscription that's within it. What? It's right. It's like the author makes it special, makes it dedicated by writing his signature, inscribing upon it, and dedicating that to someone. And then he puts it with the rest of the books, and they all look the same. It's not meant to take the book and separate it out from the pile, but it's meant to inscribe the author's signature upon it and make it separate from the others because it's got that signature. And that's what dedication is. You're not supposed to be taken out of this world, right? If you wanted Israel out of Egypt, he could have just taken them out overnight. He didn't need to do all those plagues. But he did that there to make an impact on Egypt with his people. In the same way, he still wants, if God doesn't change, he still wants us to do the same thing. He wants us to make an impact on the world today that surrounds us. He doesn't take us out. He leaves us there so that we can be a testimony. We can have an impact. And yet he dedicates us, puts us with the rest of the pile so that we ourselves know that we're dedicated to him. It's an internal thing. It's inscribed within us, and yet we're still with the pile. We're still within Egypt, and we're still in this world, yet we're set apart. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. That's kind of what Kadosh it is. Kadosh is. It's a little paradigm shift for you. Think about next time you think about Kadosh, how you can sanctify yourself from the mendacity of this world, all the mundane things. Start setting things apart. Set apart your time when you eat. We eat 3 times a day. If you don't want it to be mundane, take some time and pray while you're eating. Take take the things that you're eating and really think, these things that I should be eating, are they good for me? Not in a way of like, kosher, non-kosher, because if you're not Jewish, then you're not obligated to practice that. But you can set your eating time apart. So if you don't want it to be mundane, you can set it apart, and 3 times a day, you've set some time apart, dedicated it to God, aligning yourself with God. Set apart your sleep, your thoughts, your work. If you want your work to make a difference so that you're not burned out at the end of the week, you know, align yourself with God, have him hold your hand and let him do the work through you. If you can shift your paradigm to see that he's doing it through you, that's one way to take the mendacity of work, dedicating it to God. Giving it your best effort, knowing that you're not working for your boss in a way so much as you're working for God, and your boss is taking kind of the benefits of the fact that you're working. Um, you know, in Hebrew, the word avodah is work, and it's also the same word for worship, avodah. So, what are you doing with your hands? Are you working for the world, for the mundane things, or are you gonna set it apart and make it as if you're worshiping God? You're taking your work, your avodah, and you're turning it into worship. So, yeah, those are just a little pebbles for your shoe today. Different way to think about life. If you like this, please like and subscribe, um, and comment if you get a chance. Have a good day. Shalom.